Signing a $10 million contract made me the contract husband to an Ice Queen CEO and the nominal father to an adorable little girl. 5 years later, with her old flame back in the country, I was ready to take the money and run, handing my wife and child back over. But when I presented the divorce papers, her demeanor changed in an instant. She furiously tore the agreement to shreds, stalling with the most bizarre excuses imaginable. Mercury is in retrograde. It's a bad time for a divorce. The weight of this paper is wrong. It has no legal standing. An agreement at dawn 6 a.m. My internal clock was more reliable than any alarm. I opened my eyes. The first light was just tracing a hazy silver edge along the skyscraper cluster on the east side of New York City. The king-size bed beside me was empty. She had probably worked in her study until 3 or 4 in the morning, crept into the adjacent room for less than 2 hours of sleep, and then risen silently at 5:30 to go torture herself in the downstairs gym. For 5 years, her routine had been more rigorous than a soldier's. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the cold marble floor, and went into the bathroom. The man in the mirror was 29, with a few fine lines already creeping into the corners of his eyes. Not handsome by any means, but at least he looked clean and put together. I pulled a smile on my reflection. Yep, today's professional-grade fake smile was up to standard. Pulling on an apron, I walked into the corner of this $100 million penthouse duplex that I knew best, the open-plan kitchen. This was my territory, the only place in this cold, sterile home that felt alive. I heated a pan, drizzled in a touch of olive oil, and listened to the gentle sizzle. I cracked 2 organic eggs. The one for my daughter, Chloe, had to be a perfect sunny side up with lacy, crispy edges and a flawless, runny yolk. The one for Isabella Thorne had to be fully cooked, broken, and scrambled into a soft, creamy American style. As for mine, I'd make do with whatever was left over, usually the scraps. A ding from the toaster oven announced that the whole wheat toast was ready, smelling wonderfully fragrant. I trimmed the crust from the slices. One portion got a spread of Chloe's favorite strawberry jam. The other was for Isabella's unwavering avocado toast. In the juicer, oranges and carrots spun into a vibrant golden liquid, while the espresso machine extracted a shot of rich, dark coffee. 3 breakfasts, 3 separate lives, clearly defined. "Daddy," a bright, sweet voice called from the top of the stairs. I turned to see a little angel in pink bunny pajamas, rubbing her eyes as she ran down with her little feet bare. "Chloe, how many times have I told you? The floor is cold in the morning. You need to wear your slippers." My words were a reprimand, but my body betrayed me. I walked over and scooped her in my arms, letting her little feet warm up on my own slippers. "Good morning, Daddy." She planted a loud, wet kiss on my cheek, leaving behind a mixture of saliva and the milky scent of a child. "Good morning, my little princess." I tap her nose. "Go wash your face and brush your teeth, then we can have breakfast." "Okay." Like a happy little bird, she zipped into the kids' bathroom. I set the breakfast on the table, just as Chloe, having washed up on her little step stool, settled obediently into her custom-made high chair. "Wow, it's a Mr. Sun egg," she chirped, swinging her legs happily at the sight of the cute shape on her plate. Just then, a rhythmic, imposing set of footsteps approached from the foyer. Isabella was back from her morning workout. She wore a high-end black athletic set that outlined her flawless figure. Sweat dampened a few strands of hair on her forehead, lending a hint of human vitality to a face that was usually as cold and impassive as a marble statue. But her beautiful, almond-shaped eyes remained as icy as ever. She walked straight past the dining area without a glance at us and headed upstairs. Chloe and I were used to it. She was like a roommate with a precise schedule, or perhaps a noble and distant landlord. 10 minutes later, she reappeared, transformed. She was dressed in a crisply tailored white pantsuit, her makeup immaculate, her long hair coiled flawlessly at the nape of her neck. She was once again the Ice Queen CEO of Apex Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar corporate empire. She walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Picking up her breakfast, her eyes were already fixed on the tablet beside her hand, its screen filled with dense stock market charts and financial news. The dining room was quiet, punctuated only by Chloe's happy gasp as she poked her yolk with a tiny spoon and my occasional, soft reminders to eat slowly. Between Isabella and me, there was no communication. For 5 years, most mornings have been just like this. I silently ate my toast crusts, feeling like a diligent background prop in this silent film we called family. Just then, the phone in my pocket buzzed softly. I pulled it out. It was an automatic notification from my calendar app. A single line of text, like an awl, pierced my heart with precision. 30 days remaining on contract. My hand trembled almost imperceptibly. 5 years. 1,825 days. It was finally coming to an end. My term as a contract husband and rented father was about to expire. I looked up, my gaze complicated as it fell on Isabella across the table. She was still focused on her tablet, completely oblivious to my reaction. In her eyes, perhaps I truly was just a contract on the verge of expiration. At the same time, the massive flat-screen TV on the wall was silently playing the morning business report. My eyes flicked over to it, and a handsome, almost unfairly good-looking face appeared on screen. The anchor was reporting with an almost breathless excitement. All eyes on the business world. Julian Croft, the former heir to Croft Industries, once hailed as a business prodigy, has made a high-profile return to New York City after 5 years abroad. He announced today the launch of Morningstar Ventures, making a powerful entry into the fields of artificial intelligence and venture capital. I saw Isabella's hand, the one holding her coffee cup, pause for a fraction of a second. Her gaze lifted from her tablet and settled on the face on the screen. Her eyes held a complex emotion I couldn't decipher, like dust from a long-sealed memory stirred up by a sudden gust of wind. I lowered my head and continued to gnaw on my toast crust. It tasted like wax. The main character had returned. My countdown had begun. Old Town memories, after dropping Chloe off at the most exclusive bilingual preschool in all of New York. I didn't go straight home. That penthouse apartment, perched atop the skyline of the East Side's financial district, felt more like a meticulously staged, rented showroom than a home, despite its science fiction-level luxury. It only felt like a home when Chloe was there. I drove the understated Volvo that Isabella had assigned me across the bridge over the East River, leaving the world of capital and order on the East Side and returning to the West Side, Brooklyn, a place brimming with the grit and warmth of real life. This was my world. I parked the car on a small side street in an old neighborhood and got out. The air was immediately filled with familiar smells. The aroma of fresh bagels from the corner deli, the sun-baked scent of laundry hanging on a neighbor's fire escape, and the distant, chaotic symphony of a local market. These sounds and smells finally allowed the nerves that had been wound tight all morning to unwind. I walked slowly along the riverbank, watching the water flow, my thoughts drifting back more than 5 years. It was an equally oppressive afternoon. The director of the group home, where I grew up, lay in a hospital bed, clutching a critical condition notice. The doctor said the heart bypass surgery, plus the imported medication afterward, would cost at least $200,000. The sooner, the better. I, an orphan who had grown up in the foster system, was working as an administrative assistant at a small firm, making maybe $4,000 a month. I had emptied every penny of my savings and still had less than $10,000. Just as I was hitting rock bottom, even contemplating selling a kidney, a black Bentley pulled up in front of me. A well-dressed lawyer in gold-rimmed glasses handed me a file and a business card. Mr. Hayes, our CEO, Ms. Thorne, would like to discuss a business proposition with you. That was the first time I met Isabella Thorne. It was in a private club overlooking the entire city. She wore a black gown, looking surreally beautiful and just as surreally cold. She wasted no words, pushing a prepared contract across the table toward me. Sign it. Be my legal husband for 5 years and a nominal father to my unborn child. When the contract ends, $10 million. I thought I had run into a sophisticated scam. $10 million. The number was an astronomical figure to me, completely unreal. It wasn't until the lawyer placed a cashier's check for $1 million on the table as a down payment that I realized it was all real. I barely hesitated. Forget $10 million. At that moment, if they had offered just the $200,000 I needed, I would have signed my life away. The life of the woman who raised me was more important than anything. I still remember how my hand shook as I signed Ethan Hayes on the contract. Isabella's expression never changed. As she took the contract back, she just looked at me with those cold eyes and said flatly, Mr. Hayes, I hope you're smart, man. Remember the non-disclosure agreement. From this day forward, you are Ethan Hayes, my husband. And just like that, Ethan Hayes, a regular guy from an old neighborhood in Brooklyn, became the live-in husband of one of New York City's most powerful families. I moved into that sky-high mansion and began to learn how to play a role I didn't know. The first year, I lived like a robot. I strictly followed every clause in the contract: separate bedrooms, no interfering in each other's private lives, and playing the part of a loving couple at all public events. I learned to take care of her during her pregnancy, clumsily researching recipes for expectant mothers, getting up in the middle of the night to massage her leg cramps, and silently handing her a glass of warm water when morning sickness left her pale. She never said thank you, just accepted it all silently. At the time, I saw it as my job, the duties required of me for my $10 million compensation. Until the day Chloe was born. I paced outside the delivery room, a nervous wreck, more anxious than any of the Thorne family members who were present. When the nurse brought the tiny, wrinkled, red-faced infant out to me and said, "Congratulations, mister." "Hayes, it's a girl." My mind went blank. I reached out with trembling hands and carefully took her. She was so small, so soft, and she let out a tiny, fragile cry in my arms. In that instant, I felt something inside me break. Paternal love, an emotion I had never experienced, washed over me like a sudden tsunami, completely overwhelming me. From that day on, everything changed. The contract, $10 million, my obligations. All those cold, transactional terms became meaningless the first time Chloe smiled at me, the first time she babbled to I began to willingly pour everything I had into this simulated family. I studied child psychology and advanced nutrition just so she could grow up healthier and happier. I read her picture books, built Lego towers with her, and crawled around on the living room floor pretending to be a puppy. I watched her grow from a swaddled infant into a little girl who could run, jump, and sweetly wrap her arms around my neck to cuddle. I started to feel a powerful sense of belonging to this family. At the same time, I began to see another side of Isabella. I saw her in her study late at night, pinching the bridge of her nose in exhaustion as she pored over complex financial reports. I heard her murmuring, "Don't go," in her sleep during a nightmare. I discovered she didn't actually like black coffee. She only drank it to stay awake. She loved spicy food, but had to restrain herself because of a sensitive stomach. My initial awe and respect for her slowly, unknowingly, transformed into a deep sense of compassion. I fell in love with her. That realization terrified me. The deeper I fell, the more my insecurity grew. Who was I? I was just a tool she had bought for $10 million. The man the entire upper echelon of society mocked as the $10 million husband. At those glittering galas, I could hear the socialites whispering behind my back. "Look, that's him. Isabella Thorne's $10 million husband. I heard he was just some office drone." Talk about dumb luck. It was just to find a father for that bastard child. So pathetic. On the surface, I maintained a polite smile, but my palms were slick with cold sweat. I knew that between us lay a gulf as wide as the East River, two worlds that could never truly connect. I wasn't good enough for her. My existence was merely to serve as a temporary bridge for her during her most difficult time, until her true love, Julian Croft, returned. Now the 5 years were almost up, and Julian was back. It was time to dismantle the bridge. I let out a long breath, the river breeze cool against my face. I pulled out my phone and looked at the lock screen, a photo of Chloe and me in an amusement park, her smile as bright as the sun. For a $10 million contract, I had received the most precious treasure in the world, my daughter. It was worth it. As for Isabella, watching her be happy from a distance would be enough. I turned and walked back toward the car. It was time to make a clean break. A showdown at the mall the weekend was Chloe's favorite time, family day. I had promised to take her to the new aquarium downtown. The little girl had been excited all week, chattering about seeing the beluga whales even in her sleep. To make the day even more special, we first went to a luxury shopping center on Madison Avenue to buy her a new sketchbook and colored pencils. She wanted to draw all the sea creatures she saw. Madison Avenue, a symbol of New York's East Side elite. The very air here seemed to shimmer with the scent of money. Every time I came, I felt like a bull in a china shop, completely out of place. Chloe, however, was perfectly at ease. She took my hand and expertly led me toward a high-end children's boutique, where a single small toy could cost more than my old monthly salary. Just as we reached the entrance of the store, a warm, magnetic male voice spoke from behind us. "Isabella." My body went rigid. I recognized that voice from the business news. I turned around, and sure enough, there was that handsome face. Julian Croft. He was dressed in a tailored beige, casual suit, no tie, with the top two buttons of his shirt undone, giving him an air of effortless charm and a touch of calculated nonchalance. He wore a perfect smile, but his eyes went straight past me to Isabella, who was standing beside me. Oh, right. Isabella was with us today. It was the first time in a month she had proactively suggested joining us. She was dressed down in a simple white t-shirt and jeans with light makeup. It softened her usual aggressive edge, making her look more like a friendly older sister. "Julian? It's been a while," Isabella said, her tone flat, betraying no emotion. But she instinctively took half a step closer to me, a tiny movement that inexplicably settled my nerves. "Yes, 5 years." Julian's gaze lingered on Isabella for a few seconds, filled with just the right amount of nostalgia and admiration. Then, as if just noticing me, he turned his attention my way. His smile remained warm, but his eyes held a new layer of scrutiny and superiority. "You must be Mr. Hayes. I've heard so much about you." He extended his hand. I shook it. His was warm and dry, the pressure firm but not aggressive. "Flawless. Thank you for taking care of Isabella and the child all these years," he said. That deliberate pause before the child was a tiny needle pricking at my heart. He was reminding me that I was just a placeholder, that the child wasn't mine. I smiled, my voice calm but firm. "It was no trouble. Taking care of my own wife and daughter is what I'm supposed to do." I deliberately stressed the words "my own" and "daughter." Julian's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly, clearly not expecting such a direct counter. He quickly recovered his smile and knelt down to Chloe's eye level. Like a magician, he produced a beautifully wrapped box from behind his back. "Hello there, little one. I'm Uncle Julian. A little something for our first meeting." He opened the box to reveal a limited edition Barbie doll in a magnificent princess gown, studded with glittering Swarovski crystals. I was willing to bet that one doll cost more than my Volvo. It was a blatant display of wealth, a crushing blow from a different value system. He was telling me, in no uncertain terms, that he could provide things I never could. Chloe's big eyes blinked. She looked at the sparkling doll, then up at me. I gave her an encouraging nod. I had faith in my 5 years of parenting. Chloe took a small step forward, tilted her head up, and said to Julian in a clear, serious voice, "Thank you, Uncle, but this doll doesn't have a soul." The smile on Julian's face froze solid. The silence was palpable. Ignoring him completely, Chloe ran back to me, hugged my leg tightly, and announced with immense pride, "I only want the castle my daddy made for me out of cardboard boxes." With that, she buried her face in my pant leg like a little kitten seeking refuge, leaving Julian with nothing but the back of her fluffy head. I could practically feel the color drain from Julian's face, his expression shifting from surprise to embarrassment, and finally, to a poorly concealed flicker of anger and humiliation. And Isabella, who had been standing silently by, had a tiny, faint, but very real smile playing on her lips. In that moment, a wave of pride washed over me unlike anything I had ever felt. I knelt down, scooped Chloe into my arms, and kissed her forehead. My daughter was my armor and my pride. "Julian Croft, you might have everything money can buy, but you missed these 5 years. The castle that Chloe and I built with cardboard boxes, old newspapers, and countless bedtime stories is indestructible. That's something you can never buy back, no matter how much money you have." A confession in the dark, the first confrontation with Julian Croft had been a decisive victory for me, but it brought me little joy. Instead, it intensified my anxiety. Julian's appearance was a boulder dropped into the seemingly calm lake of our family, sending ripples spreading in every direction. After that day, Isabella became even more withdrawn. She worked later and later, sometimes spending the entire night in her study. I knew she was hiding from Julian, hiding from me, and hiding from the turmoil in her own heart. The final straw came late one night. I couldn't sleep, so around 2 in the morning, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw the vast living room shrouded in darkness. Only the giant screen of the flat-panel TV glowed silently. It was replaying Julian Croft's sensational homecoming interview. On the screen, he was charismatic and articulate, the golden boy incarnate. And there, alone on the sofa in the darkness, was Isabella. She hadn't turned on any lights, letting the thick shadows envelop her. The flickering light from the TV cast an ephemeral glow on her beautiful profile. In her hand, she held an old picture frame. I recognized it, the one she kept hidden in the back of her nightstand drawer. It was a photo of her and Julian from their college days, both of them smiling, bright-eyed and innocent. She just sat there, watching him on the screen, her thumb stroking the frame. In the cavernous living room, she looked so small, so lonely. I stood in the shadows of the staircase, my heart squeezed tight by an invisible hand, the pain making it hard to breathe. I understood. She had never forgotten him. The only reason she had been able to maintain this peaceful life with me and Chloe for the past 5 years was because Julian wasn't here. Now he was back, and the volcano that had been dormant in her heart for 5 years was about to erupt. It was time for the temporary replacement to make his exit. I retreated silently upstairs, lay in bed with my eyes wide open, and didn't sleep a wink. I had made my decision. Perhaps the greatest act of love is to let someone go. The next morning, it was the same routine. I made breakfast, woke Chloe, and then watched Isabella, like a queen, coldly consume her portion. Everything was as normal as ever, a calm that was deeply unsettling. After Chloe finished breakfast and was taken to the garden by the nanny, only Isabella and I remained in the dining room. I took a deep breath, summoning all my strength to keep my voice steady and gentle. Isabella. She looked up from her tablet, her eyes questioning. I forced a smile, trying to look as casual as possible, like a project manager reporting on a project that was nearing successful completion. The contract is almost up. Her pupils seemed to constrict for a second. I pushed on, each word a blade carving up my own heart. Julian is back. I think. It's time to give him back what's his. I paused, looking her straight in the eye, and said word by word, we should find time to get the paperwork done. I had said it. The dining room fell into a dead silence. I watched as the color drained from Isabella's face. The knuckles of the hand, holding her coffee cup, turned white from the force of her grip. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a shock, disbelief, and even a flicker of panic. I must have been mistaken. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. Her voice was colder than a Siberian wind, a single word forced through clenched teeth. Fine. With that, she shot up from her chair, the sudden movement causing it to scrape harshly against the floor. Without another glance at me, she turned and walked away, her high heels clicking with a resolve that seemed almost desperate. I sat there, staring at her unfinished coffee, the steam long gone. My heart, too, was growing cold. The standoff the day after Isabella said, fine, I acted with unprecedented efficiency. I downloaded a divorce agreement template online, filled it out meticulously, printed 2 copies, and placed them neatly in a file folder. When it was all done, I felt completely drained of energy. I told myself, Ethan, this is your last task. You have to see it through to the end, a perfect conclusion. That evening, after Isabella got home, I gathered my courage and went to her study. Isabella, I've prepared the agreement. Take a look, and if there are no issues, we can go sign it tomorrow. I tried my best to sound businesslike. She was at her desk, wearing blue light blocking glasses, focused on her computer screen. She didn't even look up, just gave a cool hum. Then she said, just leave it there. I have an urgent email to respond to. Okay. I placed a folder on the corner of her desk and left. I thought that was the beginning. I was naive. I had underestimated the sheer number of creative excuses a corporate queen could come up with when she didn't want to do something. 3 days later, the folder was still sitting in the exact same spot, untouched. I couldn't help but remind her again. Isabella, about the agreement. This time, she didn't even bother with an hum. She cut me off. The company is in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar merger. The board is at each other's throats. I don't have time for personal matters. It was a powerful excuse. I couldn't argue. Another week passed. The merger was front-page news on the business journals, a done deal. Now she should have time, I thought. I entered her study for the 3rd time. Isabella. Chloe has her final exams coming up. She anticipated my move again, her tone leaving no room for argument. You know she gets anxious about tests. If we do this now, it will affect her emotionally. We'll talk after her exams are over. I was completely defeated. My daughter was my weak spot, and she had just struck the most vulnerable point. I was utterly confused. She had agreed so readily. So why was she dragging her feet now? Making excuses? Was filing for divorce more complicated than negotiating a billion-dollar merger? I couldn't figure it out. I chalked it up to a common ailment of the powerful, procrastination, and the fact that my matter was at the very bottom of her priority list. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. The days passed in this strange push and pull. On one hand, she had verbally drawn a line between us. On the other, her actions were unconsciously contradictory. For example, she would accidentally leave a critical document at home, then call me in a panic 5 minutes before a board meeting, ordering me to deliver it to her office within 15 minutes. So I would race the Volvo through yellow lights, feeling like a delivery driver, and rush into the Apex Holdings headquarters. I handed her the file in front of all the top executives, who stared at me with a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. I was the legendary Mr. Thorne, a mythical figure few had ever seen in person. Isabella took the file, coolly said, "Be more careful next time," and walked into the boardroom. I stood there, feeling like a tool summoned and then immediately discarded. But her best friend, Grace, later secretly told me that Isabella had been smiling for the entire meeting. Another time, at a Thorne family dinner, a distant relative who loved to gossip said to me with a snide tone, "Well, Ethan, you've had it pretty comfortable these past 5 years, haven't you? Doing nothing, with endless money to spend. Once the contract is up and you've got that huge payout, you'll be set for life." His voice was just loud enough for the whole table to hear. I was so embarrassed I wanted to crawl into a hole. I just raised my glass, pretending to drink. Just then, Isabella, who had been silent, suddenly put down her chopsticks. She didn't look at the relative. She just let her icy gaze sweep across the table. The entire room fell silent. "Aunt Carol," she said, her voice soft but heavy with authority. "Ethan is my husband. He is Chloe's father, and he is a member of the Thorne family. I trust this is the last time I will have to hear comments like that." The table was utterly silent. The aunt's face turned beet red. I stared at Isabella, my heart hammering in my chest. Was she defending me? For the first time in 5 years, she had publicly acknowledged my status in front of her family. I knew it was probably just a move to save face for the Thorne name. But in that moment, a warmth spread through my chest. This woman was becoming harder and harder to understand. A test at the dinner table, the Thorne family dinners had always been a trial for me, especially when facing the family's formidable patriarch, Arthur Thorne. The old man was a retired legend of the business world, a traditionalist who valued family reputation above all else. From the day I walked through their door, I could feel the undisguised disdain in his eyes. To him, I was the bought son-in-law, a stain on the Thorne family name. So, at every dinner, I tried to shrink into the background to be seen and not heard. But tonight, my luck had run out. Halfway through dinner, the conversation turned to child-rearing. 5-year-old Chloe had recently entered her first rebellious phase. Specifically, she now refused to touch the piano she once loved, throwing a tantrum on the floor whenever it was time to practice. Isabella had hired the best child development specialists in the city, to no avail. Arthur Thorne was clearly aware of the situation. He set down his glass, and his sharp, shrewd eyes suddenly fixed on me. "Ethan." At his word, every head at the table turned my way. "I hear Chloe is refusing to practice the piano lately." His tone was calm, but it carried an undercurrent of authority. My stomach clenched. I knew this was a trap. He was putting me on the spot, trying to humiliate me, to prove that the fake father was useless. I put down my chopsticks, stood up, and answered respectfully, "Yes, grandfather. You're home with her all day. What do you suppose is the reason for this?" he asked slowly, a faint, mocking smile on his lips. Beside me, Isabella's brow furrowed. She looked like she was about to intervene. I gave her a reassuring glance, and then turned back to the old man, my voice even and steady. "Grandfather, I don't think Chloe is being rebellious." My first sentence surprised everyone at the table. Even Arthur Thorne seemed taken aback. I collected myself and began to explain what I had learned from my observations and my reading on child psychology. From a psychological perspective, a 5-year-old sense of self is beginning to fully blossom. For the first time, she's clearly aware that I am an independent individual with my own thoughts and desires. So she's not rebelling against playing the piano itself. She's testing the boundaries of her own will by saying no. She's seeking the power to choose and control her own life. I looked at the patriarch and continued. The more we force her, the more fiercely she'll resist, because it makes her feel like her will isn't being respected. This isn't about how well she plays the piano. It's a necessary psychological stage in a child's development. When I finished, the dining room was silent. Everyone stared at me with expressions of disbelief, as if they were seeing me for the first time. In their eyes, I was supposed to be a stay-at-home dad who was good for nothing but cooking and childcare. They never imagined I could articulate such a clear, well-reasoned argument. For the first time, Arthur Thorne's face showed genuine surprise. His appraising eyes scanned me up and down. "So, what do you suggest we do?" one of the uncles asked. I smiled and offered my solution. "It's simple. We turn commands into choices. Instead of saying, 'Chloe, it's time to practice piano,' we ask her, 'Chloe, we're going to practice for half an hour today. Would you like to practice now, or after you have some fruit? Or do you want to play the new piece from yesterday, or review last week's lesson?' We give the power of choice back to her, making her feel like she's in charge, not just a passive follower. When her will is respected, her resistance will naturally fade." I finished with a slight bow to the old man. "Grandfather, that's just my humble opinion." Arthur Thorne stared at me for a long time. His expression shifted from initial disdain to surprise, then to scrutiny, and finally to something that looked like approval. He said, nodding slowly. "That sounds plausible. Let's try it your way." It was the first time in 5 years I had received a single word of positive feedback from Arthur Thorne. As I sat down, I snuck a glance at Isabella. I saw a tiny, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real smile on her face. And in that smile, I saw a flicker of something I had never seen before. Pride. In that moment, I felt that all my late-night reading over the past 5 years had been worth it. I might not have a vast fortune or a prestigious family name, but the knowledge and care I possessed were a value that money couldn't measure. The blind date debacle after that family dinner, Isabella's attitude toward me shifted subtly. She no longer treated me like I was invisible. Sometimes, when we passed in the dining room, she'd ask, "How was Chloe at school today?" Her tone was still cool, but it was a groundbreaking improvement. Her excuses for delaying the divorce grew increasingly absurd. It went from "I'm busy with work" and "Chloe has exams" to "I have an important international video conference next week, and the home Wi-Fi has to be optimal." The negative energy from filing for divorce could interfere with the signal. I was left speechless. Just as I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown from her games, my childhood friend, Mike, gave me a call. Mike and I grew up in the same foster home, and now he ran a popular barbecue joint in Brooklyn. He was one of the few people in this city I could really talk to. "Ethan, are you an idiot? That Ice Queen is obviously messing with you. Are you really going to walk away with nothing and hand her and your kid over to that other guy?" Mike's voice on the phone was as fiery as his grill. I sighed. "Mike, you don't get it. We're from different worlds." "Bullshit." Mike shot back. "What worlds? You've been a father to her daughter for 5 years. That's your kid. You need to start thinking about yourself. I set you up with someone. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. West Side Coffee. You have to be there." I was about to refuse, but then a thought occurred to me. Maybe this was a way to give Isabella some peace of mind. If she saw that I was already moving on, maybe she'd stop with the ridiculous excuses. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. The next afternoon, feeling like I was walking to my own execution, I arrived at the coffee shop. The woman was an elementary school teacher, pretty, quiet, and the kind of person you could build a life with. We made awkward, small talk, the atmosphere so uncomfortable I could have dug a trench in the floor with my toes. My eyes kept drifting out the window, my mind elsewhere. I wondered if Chloe was napping, if she had kicked her blankets off. I wondered if Isabella had remembered to take her stomach medication. As I was lost in thought, the door to the coffee shop was suddenly thrown open with tremendous force, sending the little bell above it into a frantic jingle. I instinctively looked up, and then I saw a sight I would never forget. A flashy Aston Martin was illegally parked right in front of the cafe, blocking half the street. A door opened, and a long, slender leg emerged, clad in a 4-inch Jimmy Choo heel. Then, Isabella, my nominal wife, stepped out. She was wearing a sleek black pantsuit and sunglasses that covered half her face, instantly transforming the cozy little coffee shop into the stage for her latest corporate press conference. She strode toward me with the powerful aura of a queen surveying her domain. The entire cafe fell silent. I was glued to her. I sat there, my mind a complete blank, forgetting how to react. What was she doing here? She stopped at my table. She took off her sunglasses, revealing that breathtakingly beautiful and breathtakingly cold face. She didn't even glance at the woman sitting across from me. Her icy, almond-shaped eyes were fixed directly on me. Then, in a tone so calm, it was almost cruel, she spoke. "Mr. Hayes." She only ever called me Mr. Hayes when she was being her most distant and formal. "Does my daughter's father have time to be on a date?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit the small coffee shop like a depth charge. I saw the teacher across from me, her mouth hanging open, the spoon in her hand clattering into her cup. The other patrons all had the excited look of people who had just stumbled upon some prime gossip. And me? After the initial shock, the feeling that washed over me wasn't embarrassment or anger, but a tiny, shameful flicker of glee. Was this woman jealous? I looked at her clenched jaw and her eyes, which were trying so hard to remain calm, but betrayed a hint of panic. And suddenly I thought maybe she wasn't so cold after all. A confession under the influence of the dramatic blind date ended with the teacher fleeing in terror and Isabella escorting me home. The drive back in the Aston Martin was silent. The atmosphere in the car was colder than a Siberian winter. I stole glances at her. She stared straight ahead, her profile as tense and perfect as an ice sculpture. I knew she was angry, but I didn't know what she was angry about. Angry that I had embarrassed her by going on a date? Or angry that I was really preparing to leave? From that day on, our relationship entered an even stranger phase. She stopped mentioning the divorce, and I didn't dare bring it up. We were like two tightrope walkers, carefully maintaining a fragile balance. The turning point came a week later. Apex Holdings had successfully secured a massive European partnership, a project Isabella had been working on for nearly a year. To celebrate, the company held a huge victory banquet. As the CEO's spouse, my attendance was mandatory. At the party, Isabella was undoubtedly the center of attention. She wore a backless, wine-red gown, as radiant as a thorny rose. Partners, executives, and socialites all took turns toasting her. She accepted every one, glass after glass. I knew she was using the alcohol to release the immense pressure that had been building up. I stood silently half a step behind her, like a dutiful bodyguard. When another greasy investor approached with a glass, I stepped forward, smiling, and blocked his path. Mr. Wong, Isabella's stomach isn't well. She can't drink anymore. I'll take this one for her. Without waiting for a reply, I took her glass and downed it in one go. For the rest of the night, I acted as her filter, intercepting at least half the drinks meant for her. By the end, Isabella was still lucid, but her eyes were glazed over. I, on the other hand, was feeling decidedly lightheaded. After the party, on the way home in the back of the Rolls-Royce, she must have been truly exhausted. She leaned against the window and fell into a deep sleep. The car hit a bump, and her head slid sideways, coming to rest gently on my shoulder. Her breath, tinged with alcohol, was warm against my neck. It tickled. I froze, not daring to move. In 5 years, this was the closest physical contact we had ever shared. I looked down and saw her long eyelashes casting a quiet shadow on her cheeks. In her sleep, she had let down all her defenses, her brow slightly furrowed, looking like a lost child. My heart melted. When we got home, I helped her out of the car. She was unsteady on her feet, her entire weight leaning against me. I half carried her to her bedroom. Just as I was about to lay her on the bed and make my retreat, her arms suddenly tightened around my waist. She buried her face in my chest like a cat seeking warmth. Don't move. Her voice was husky from the alcohol, laced with a vulnerability I had never heard before. I stood there paralyzed. Your cooking is the best. She mumbled into my chest as if talking in her sleep. My heart jolted. Chloe can't lose her daddy. Her arms tightened even more, as if she were afraid I would disappear. I swallowed hard. In the darkness, I heard her whisper words as light as a feather, words that shattered my defenses completely. Don't go. Boom. It felt like an atom bomb had gone off in my world. Every wall I had built, every ounce of reason and self-doubt was obliterated in that single moment. I looked down at the woman in my arms, so fragile, she seemed like she would break at the slightest touch. So she knew. So she was scared too. So she didn't want me to go. Slowly, hesitantly, I raised my hand and finally let it rest on her back, patting her gently. I don't know how I got back to my room that night. The next morning, when I saw her in the dining room, she was back to her usual icy self. She wore a tailored suit, her makeup was flawless, and the vulnerable woman who had clung to me the night before seemed like a figment of my imagination. When she saw me, she avoided my gaze and asked, feigning nonchalance, "Last night, I didn't say anything foolish, did I?" I looked at her, smiled, and shook my head. "No, you were tired. You fell asleep as soon as we got home." She visibly relaxed. I didn't call her bluff, but I knew, from that moment on, everything was different. Beneath her mountain of ice, there was a soft, warm sea, yearning for connection. The ultimate push and pull after that night, the unspoken tension between Isabella and me, became almost transparent. We both knew the truth, but stubbornly maintained a facade of normalcy. It was a strange feeling, like playing a high-stakes game of chicken where only the two of us knew the rules. The game piece was the divorce agreement I had printed, still unsigned. I decided to test her one more time. I placed the agreement, which had been languishing on her desk for nearly a month, back in a prominent spot. "Isabella, Chloe's exams are over." I was thinking. She was reading a document and didn't look up. Just leave it there. The next day, it was still there. The third day, same story. On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I brought the agreement directly to her. "Ms. Thorne, if I could have 3 minutes of her time to sign this." I mimicked the deferential tone of her employees, half joking. She looked up, glanced at me, then at the papers, her brow furrowed slightly. "Not today," she said flatly. "Why not?" I pressed. "Mercury is in retrograde," she said with a completely straight face. "My astrologer said it's a bad time to sign contracts. It could lead to disputes." I was speechless. I had lived for 29 years and had never known that a billionaire CEO made decisions based on her horoscope. Fine, I could wait for Mercury to go direct. A week later, I approached her again with the papers. "Ms. Thorne, the stars are aligned today, auspicious for all manner of binding agreements." She took the agreement, read it over twice with a critical eye, and then looked at me with a professional, discerning gaze. "No. What is it now?" My patience was wearing thin. "The weight of this paper is wrong." She pointed at the document. "Official legal documents should be printed on 32-pound premium stock. This is 20-pound at best. It's too flimsy. It looks unprofessional. It has no legal standing. I took a deep breath. Stay calm, I told myself. Do not argue with a woman who does not want a divorce. Fine. I'll go buy the 32-pound paper tomorrow and reprint it. The next day, after driving all over the city, I finally found the legally binding paper, reprinted the agreement, and respectfully presented it to her. Ms. Thorne, will this suffice? She took it, picked up my pen from the holder, made a mark on the paper, and shook her head. Still no. Your Majesty, what is the reason this time? I had completely surrendered. The ink in your pen is too light. She held the paper up to the light. See? This black isn't a true black. It's more of a charcoal. Signing something this important requires pure black ink. It shows sincerity. I looked at her face, so serious as she spouted this utter nonsense, and finally, I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. She froze, clearly not expecting that reaction. I shook my head, still laughing, walked over, and took the much-maligned divorce agreement from her hands. In front of her, I tore it in half and dropped the pieces into the trash can. We're not getting a divorce, I said. Her body gave a slight, almost imperceptible tremble. She looked up sharply, her eyes wide with shock and uncertainty. I looked at her and said, clearly and deliberately, Isabella Thorne, in this game, I concede. I didn't want to fight with you anymore, because I realized I don't even want to win. I just want to stay like this, with you, for the rest of my life. I saw something in her eyes, frozen for 5 long years, finally begin to melt. That night, Chloe, through some masterful scheming, first lured our golden retriever into my guest room, where it accidentally broke the thermostat. Then, just as I was about to make a bed on the sofa, she accidentally spilled a large basin of the dog's bathwater all over it. Finally, clutching her little pillow and with tears in her eyes, she ran into the master bedroom with the irrefutable excuse, I'm scared of the dark. I need Mommy and Daddy to sleep with me tonight, successfully maneuvering us into the same bed. After our daughter fell asleep between us, the huge master bedroom was filled with a silence charged with 5 years of unspoken tension, awkwardness, and a palpable, burgeoning intimacy. In the darkness, our breathing and heartbeats seemed to echo in the quiet space. In an environment like this, one's defenses are at their lowest. A confession in the dark, once Chloe's breathing settled into a deep, even rhythm between us, the cavernous master bedroom fell silent, save for the presence of Isabella and me. The darkness felt thick, a viscous liquid enveloping us, amplifying every sense. I could hear her slightly ragged breath, and I could feel the frantic thrum of her heart less than 3 feet away from mine. For 5 years, this was the first time we had shared the same darkness at such close proximity. The air was thick with tension, nervousness, and a strange, nascent intimacy that had been building for half a decade. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Just as I thought we might remain this way until dawn, a trembling voice, thick with emotion, cut through the darkness. Ethan. Yeah. I answered softly, my own heart skipping a beat. Do you really want to leave that badly? The question was a key, long forged, finally turning in the lock of the most heavily fortified door between us. I rolled onto my side to face her, trying to find the outline of her eyes in the gloom. This was a question I had to answer while looking at her. I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I could feel her body tense beside me. And now, her voice held a faint glimmer of hope, one she probably didn't even realize was there. I let out a small, bittersweet laugh. Now, I don't know. I chose to be honest. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I laid bare all the pain, insecurity, and conflict I had suppressed for 5 years. Isabella, I'm an orphan. For someone who grew up in the system, what you crave most isn't money. It's a home. A real warm family. 5 years ago, you gave me the chance to play the part of a husband and a father. At first, I thought it was just a job, a well-paying contract. All I had to do was follow the script, play my part, and I'd get the $10 million to pay back the woman who raised me. But I messed up. I got too invested in the role. My voice started to tremble as the emotions I had fought so hard to contain began to breach their dam. The moment Chloe was born, the first time I held her, the first time she smiled at me, the first time she babbled, Daddy, do you know? In that moment, the contract, the $10 million, it all meant nothing. I felt like I had the whole world. I fell in love with this fake family. I fell in love with being Chloe's dad. And I fell in love with you. The last words were a whisper, but they took every ounce of my strength. I felt her breath catch beside me. The deeper I fell, the more scared and insecure I became. Who am I? I'm just a tool you bought for $10 million. The $10 million husband that the entire high society laughs at. I wear the designer clothes you buy, drive the car you provide, live in this multi-million-dollar penthouse, but I know better than anyone that none of it is mine. I feel like a thief who stole 5 years of happiness. I'm not good enough for you, Isabella. What separates us isn't just the East River. It's two completely different worlds. All I can give Chloe is a castle made of cardboard boxes. Julian Croft can give her a real Disneyland. So when he came back, honestly, I was relieved. I thought, the real guy is back, and the temporary replacement can finally bow out. I should return you and Chloe to the world you belong to. I should make a graceful exit and let your family be whole. That seemed like the right thing to do. I finished, feeling empty but also lighter than I had in years, having dissected my deepest fears and insecurities for her. The darkness was heavy with silence. After a long moment, I heard a soft, suppressed sob. It was the sound of a small, wounded animal, each whimper and needle piercing my heart. "Ethan, you bastard," she suddenly choked out, her voice raw with tears. "Who are you to make my decisions for me? Who are you to decide what I want? Yes, I admit it. 5 years ago, I chose you because you had a clean slate, because you were easy to control. After Julian betrayed me, after the whole world abandoned me, I was scared. I didn't dare trust love again. I thought a cold, hard contract could protect me, could keep me in control of everything. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Her tears were flowing freely now. I couldn't see them, but I could feel the searing heat of her sorrow. These 5 years, who was it that brought me warm water in the middle of the night when I was sick from my pregnancy? Who was it that always had a hot bowl of soup waiting for me when I came home, exhausted from corporate backstabbing? Who was more nervous outside the delivery room than any member of my own family? And who taught our daughter to be so kind, so smart, so wonderful? Did you really think I made of stone? My heart is flesh and blood. With 5 years, with 1,800 days of warmth, you melted my goddamn mountain of ice a long time ago. Didn't you know that? When I heard you say you were leaving, that you were giving me back to Julian, I felt like my world was ending. But what could I do? I'm Isabella Thorne. I'm the CEO of Apex Holdings. I can't beg you. I can't grab your leg like some desperate woman and say I love you, don't go. All I could do was use those ridiculous excuses, stalling day after day. I thought you would understand. Her words were like bullets, shattering every one of my misguided assumptions. She wasn't indifferent. She was just too proud and too afraid. I couldn't control myself any longer. I reached out and pulled her tightly into my arms. Her body went stiff for a moment, then began to tremble violently. She buried her face in my chest and began to sob, not holding anything back, like a child who had been lost for 5 years and had finally found her way home. I held her close, feeling her hot tears soak through my shirt. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All I could do was repeat those 2 words over and over. I'm sorry I mistook your strength for indifference. I'm sorry I underestimated how much I meant to you. I'm sorry I almost gave up on us. That night, 5 years of repressed emotions finally broke free. Before the dawn came, we had finally broken through the paper-thin wall that had separated us for so long. The contract that began with money was, in that moment, completely rewritten by love. The family stormed the morning after our confession. I opened my eyes to a sun-drenched room. The space beside me was empty, but the pillow still carried Isabella's familiar, crisp, woody scent, now imbued with a warmth I'd never felt before. I reached over and touched her pillow, still damp and warm from her tears. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen, starting the breakfast routine as usual. But today, everything felt different. The floor wasn't cold, and the sunlight streaming through the window seemed especially brilliant. I was halfway through making a sunny-side-up egg when a pair of soft arms wrapped around my waist from behind. I froze, nearly dropping the spatula. "Good morning," Isabella's voice, husky with sleep, murmured by my ear. Her cheek was pressed against my back, and I could feel her long eyelashes brushing against my skin. My heart went into overdrive. "Morning," I stammered, my face flushing. "Daddy, Mommy, are you playing a huggy game?" Chloe's bright voice called from the stairs, filled with the excitement of discovery. Like a startled cat, Isabella instantly let go, a faint blush on her cheeks. She walked calmly to the table, picked up a coffee cup, and pretended nothing had happened. I couldn't help but laugh at her if I'm not embarrassed. Your queenly demeanor. Breakfast was a world away from the silent meals of the past. It was filled with clumsy, tentative interactions. She would ask, feigning nonchalance, "So, any plans today?" I would slide the perfectly cooked egg onto her plate, saying, "Try this. The yolk is perfect today." Chloe sat between us, looking from me to her, her big eyes filled with a wise, I get it expression. She nodded sagely and announced, "My teacher says when mommy and daddy love each other, the baby gets smarter." Isabella nearly spit out her coffee. Amid this almost surreally warm atmosphere, the business news on the TV suddenly cut to a breaking story. We have breaking news. Hope's Light, a breakthrough drug for rare childhood diseases currently in Phase 3 clinical trials by an Apex Holdings subsidiary, has been compromised. An internal source has leaked information regarding severe safety concerns, with several child participants experiencing serious adverse reactions. Following this news, Apex Holdings stock plummeted at the opening bell, and market panic is spreading. The air in the room instantly solidified. I saw the color drain from Isabella's face. Her eyes, warm just a moment ago, froze over. Hope's Light was a project she had poured her heart into for 3 years. It was the future cornerstone of Apex and a personal mission for her. Her phone began ringing frantically. It was her office. She answered, and after just a few words, her expression grew even darker. "Understand. Keep things stable. I'm on my way." She hung up, grabbed her jacket, and started for the door. "Isabella," I called out. She turned back, her eyes full of exhaustion and anxiety. I walked over to her. I didn't say anything. I just reached out, straightened her slightly rumpled collar, and said in a firm, steady voice she had never heard from me before, "Go. How about things here? Don't worry. The sky isn't falling." She stared at me, a complex mix of surprise and gratitude in her eyes, which finally settled into a look of resolute warmth. "Okay," she said, nodding firmly before leaving. Watching her rush off, I felt not a sense of powerlessness, but a profound sense of purpose. Before, her battlefield was the office, and mine was the kitchen. We were separate, but from today on, her battle was my battle. I had to defend the home front, so she could charge ahead without reservation. For the next few days, Isabella practically lived at the office. Apex Holdings was in the eye of an unprecedented storm. The stock continued to fall, partners began pulling out, protesters organized by angry parents surrounded the building, and the media was relentless. All I could do was keep the house in perfect order, keep Chloe happy and cared for, and ensure that every time she dragged her exhausted body home, there was a hot meal, a warm bath, and a peaceful harbor waiting for her. The break came on a weekend afternoon. It was a Thorne family gathering, and her uncle, Robert Thorne, was there. He looked haggard, sighing dramatically at the dinner table and criticizing Isabella for being too reckless and bringing this disaster upon the company. His hypocrisy made me sick. During the gathering, Chloe wanted to play hide-and-seek. She found Robert's briefcase on the sofa and, thinking it was a fun toy, ran off with it. Robert, busy holding court with some elders, didn't notice. Worried she'd lose his important papers, I went after her and found her in the garden, happily emptying the contents of the briefcase onto the grass. "Chloe, honey, you can't play with Uncle Robert's things," I said, gathering up the scattered files and a pen. As I picked up a forged copy of some meeting minutes, my nose caught a faint but incredibly familiar scent. It was a niche men's cologne, a cool, woody fragrance with a subtle hint of tobacco. My brain felt like it had been struck by lightning. That scent, I remembered it. It was Julian Croft's. The day we ran into him on Madison Avenue, he had been wearing that exact cologne. I had been close enough to him that the scent had stuck in my memory. A terrible thought took shape in my mind. Why would Robert Thorne's briefcase smell like Julian Croft's cologne? Unless they had been in very close contact recently. A cold sweat broke out on my back. This was no coincidence. In the bloodless battlefield of corporate warfare, the smallest detail could be the key to victory. I didn't say a word. I just quietly put everything back in the briefcase. That night, when Isabella came home, I pulled her into the study, closed the door, and told her everything I had discovered and suspected. She listened, silent for a long time. Her beautiful eyes first showed shock, then fury, and finally, they sharpened into the cold, predatory gaze of a leopardess that has locked onto its prey. She looked at me, and for the first time, her eyes held the trust of a fellow soldier. "Ethan," she said, her voice deliberate and clear, "you just did me a massive favor." Seeing the fight return to her eyes, I felt a deep sense of peace. "Go fight, Isabella. This time I got your back." The Queen's counterattack armed with the crucial lead I provided. Isabella's team moved like a surgical scalpel, cutting straight to the heart of the problem. By investigating Robert Thorne's recent financial transactions and call logs, they quickly uncovered a mountain of evidence. Secret meetings with Julian Croft, illicit money transfers, and payments to media outlets and the victim families. The vast conspiracy woven by an insider and an external enemy to topple Apex Holdings, was completely unraveled. Isabella didn't tip her hand. She waited, a patient hunter, for the perfect moment to strike. 3 days later, Apex Holdings convened an emergency board meeting. The atmosphere in the boardroom was suffocating. The conservative faction of the board, led by Robert, was in an uproar, attacking Isabella from all sides, demanding she resign for her critical error in judgment and relinquish control of the company. Robert put on a masterclass performance, tearfully recounting his decades of devotion to the company while accusing Isabella of leading the family legacy into ruin. Isabella simply sat at the head of the table, watching him perform with a dead, cold expression. Just as Robert's tirade reached its climax, and he was about to call for a vote of no confidence, the boardroom doors swung open. Arthur Thorne, leaning on a dragon-headed cane and supported by his butler, walked slowly into the room. The room fell silent. "Father, what are you doing here?" A flicker of panic crossed Robert's face. The old man ignored him, walking straight to Isabella's side. He tapped his cane sharply on the floor. His voice was quiet but carried immense weight. "If I didn't come, this family was about to be destroyed by one of its own." He gave Isabella a nod. Isabella projected a series of documents and audio files onto the main screen. There were photos of Robert and Julian's secret meetings, records of their dirty financial dealings, and phone recordings of them plotting to falsify clinical data and bribe the media. The evidence was irrefutable. The blood drained from Robert's face. "No, that's not real. She forged it. She's framing me," he stammered. "Enough." Arthur Thorne slammed his hand on the table. "You traitorous snake. You let the wolf into our house. The Thorne family has no son like you." With the patriarch presiding, the board voted unanimously to strip Robert Thorne of all his positions and shares in Apex Holdings. The uncle who had coveted the CEO chair his entire life was cleanly and utterly cast out. I learned all this from real-time text from Grace. I stared at my phone and let out a long, slow breath. The first battle was won, but it was only the beginning. Isabella's revenge was far from over. After purging the traitor from within, she immediately called a press conference, broadcast live across the country. I sat on the living room sofa with Chloe in my lap, watching the magnificent woman on the screen. She wore a sharp white suit, standing under the bright lights, facing 100 cameras with unshakable composure. She began by systematically refuting every false claim about Hope's Light with scientific data and clinical reports, proving the drug's safety and efficacy. Just then, a reporter paid by Julian stood up and asked a particularly vicious question. "Ms. Thorne, we have reason to believe you rushed this controversial drug to market because Apex is facing a cash flow crisis. Isn't it true that this crisis stems from a poor business decision you made 5 years ago, a direct result of your personal emotional issues, causing Apex to miss a golden opportunity with Croft Industries? Do you have any comment on how your judgment was clouded by your personal history?" The question was designed to kill. He was twisting a corporate conspiracy into a story of Isabella's personal failing. Every camera in the room zoomed in on her. I felt my palms begin to sweat. But on the screen, Isabella smiled. It was a cold, disdainful smile. "You want to talk about my personal emotional issues?" she asked the reporter, her voice calm. "Fine. Since everyone is so interested, let's talk about them." She paused. Then her voice rose, clear and powerful, ringing through the hall. "You want to talk about integrity? Let's talk about who stabbed me in the back 5 years ago, abandoning his pregnant fiancée for profit. You want to talk about morality? Let's talk about who returned 5 years later and, after a failed blackmail attempt, conspired with an insider to steal trade secrets and maliciously slander a life-saving medicine for sick children." With each question, she took a step forward, her presence overwhelming. She reached the front of the stage and looked directly into the cameras. "You say my judgment was clouded? You're right. I was blind once. But today I want to thank the man who hurt me, because he taught me that a man's worth is not measured by his wealth or his family name, but by his integrity, his sense of responsibility, and his basic human decency." She nodded to her assistant. The large screen behind her lit up with audio recordings and screenshots of bank transfers. There was Julian on the phone trying to extort $100 million from her using their daughter as leverage. There were the records of his payments to media trolls to create the public outcry. There is every piece of evidence of his conspiracy with Robert Thorne to destroy Apex. The press conference erupted. Flashbulbs went off like a machine gun. The reporters' faces were masks of disbelief. In that instant, the public narrative flipped completely. Julian Croft's vile scheme was laid bare for the entire country to see. He was ruined. I sat on the sofa, watching the woman on the screen command the entire room like a queen, filled with a sense of awe and pride I couldn't put into words. This was the real her. Powerful, decisive, and absolutely brilliant. Wow, mommy is so cool. Chloe pointed at the TV, clapping her little hands. I smiled and stroked her hair. Yes, she is, sweetie. Your mommy is the coolest. A father's protection. Julian Croft was finished. After Isabella's masterclass in public relations, he went from celebrated business prodigy to a social pariah. Morningstar Ventures went bankrupt before it even opened. Investors who had once fawned over him now wouldn't even take his calls. He was a laughingstock, completely ostracized by New York's elite. I thought that would be the end of it. But I had underestimated the rabid desperation of a gambler who had lost everything. That afternoon, I went to pick Chloe up from preschool. Given the recent events, Isabella had insisted on assigning 2 professional bodyguards to accompany me. I was holding Chloe's hand as we walked out the school gates. She had earned a Gold Star sticker that day and was happily chattering away. As we reached the parking lot, a beat-up white van suddenly screeched out from a corner, slamming on its brakes and blocking our path. The side door slid open with a rattling crash. A figure jumped out. It was Julian Croft. He was unrecognizable. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was greasy, and his face was covered in stubble. His bloodshot eyes glinted with a manic, unhinged light. "Where is Isabella? Tell her to come out and face me," he screamed like a cornered animal. The 2 bodyguards immediately stepped in front of us. "Mr. Croft, please leave immediately, or we will call the police." "Get out of my way." Julian was completely crazed. He pulled out a knife, its blade glinting in the sun. "I have nothing left. I'm not afraid of anything. Isabella Thorne destroyed my life, so I'm going to destroy what she cares about most." His eyes locked onto Chloe, hiding behind me. My blood ran cold. He had lost his mind. He was going to try and kidnap Chloe. "Daddy, I'm scared." Chloe clutched my jacket, her small body trembling. "Don't be scared, Chloe. Daddy's here," I said, my voice hoarse with rage and adrenaline, shielding her completely with my body. I stared at Julian, my mind racing. The bodyguard were pros, but Julian had a knife and was out of control. In a fight, there was no guarantee Chloe would be safe. In that split second, Julian charged, waving the knife wildly. "Look out!" The bodyguards met his attack, and a chaotic struggle ensued. I clutched Chloe and backed away, trying to get clear of the danger. But Julian's goal was singular. He faked a lunge, forcing one bodyguard back, then took a heavy blow from the other, using the momentum to launch himself toward me like a human cannonball. His face was a mask of suicidal glee. "Give me the kid." His hand reached for Chloe like a filthy claw. In that instant, all the blood rushed to my head. My mind went blank, except for a single, primal thought. No. I don't know where the strength came from. I pivoted, pulling Chloe out of his path, narrowly dodging his lunge. As I turned, I swung my right leg up, putting every ounce of my strength into a vicious kick that connected squarely with his jaw. There was a sickening thud. Julian cried out and flew backward, landing hard on the pavement. The knife clattered away. I didn't hesitate. I shoved Chloe into the arms of a bodyguard, yelling at him to get her in the car and lock the doors. Then I turned and walked toward the man on the ground. My heart, gentle for 29 years, was now consumed by a cold, burning rage. "Come after me, fine, but you touch my daughter, and I will end you." Julian was struggling to get up. I stepped forward and planted my foot firmly on his chest, pinning him to the ground. I looked down at his twisted, once handsome face. "Julian," my voice was as cold as the grave, "you're not even human." He glared up at me, his eyes full of venom. "Ethan, you're just a pathetic kept man. What gives you the right to have all this?" he shrieked. I laughed. I knelt down and whispered in his ear, because when Isabella needed someone, I was there. When Chloe needed a father, I was there. And now, when you have to pay for what you've done, I'm here for that too. I stood up and turned my back on him. The wail of sirens grew closer. The police arrived and hauled the broken man away in handcuffs. I stood there, watching the police car disappear, only then realizing my back was soaked with sweat and my legs were starting to shake. I rushed to the car and pulled open the door. "Daddy!" Chloe launched herself into my arms, sobbing, clinging to my neck. I held her small, trembling body, feeling her tears and snot on my face, and the massive knot of fear in my stomach finally began to unwind. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," I whispered, stroking her back. "Daddy's here. No one will ever hurt you." The late afternoon sun streamed through the car window, bathing us in a warm, peaceful light. I knew then that the storm was finally over. The patriarch's blessing with Julian Croft in prison and Robert Thorne exiled from the family. The crisis at Apex Holdings gradually subsided under Isabella's swift and decisive leadership. Life, it seemed, was finally returning to normal. But the terrifying kidnapping attempt had left a shadow on Chloe's young mind. She started having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, crying, clinging to me, and begging, "Daddy, don't go." For those few days, Isabella and I simply slept in the kids' room, placing Chloe's little bed between us. We flanked her like guardian angels, staying with her through the night. Using what I'd learned about child psychology, I didn't force her to forget. Instead, I gently guided her to express her fears through drawing and storytelling, helping her process the trauma. Isabella cleared her schedule of all non-essential work, coming home on time every day to read books and play games with us. Our little family of three became more tightly knit than ever before. Slowly but surely, the smile returned to Chloe's face. A week later, Arthur Thorne sent for us. He was convening a formal family meeting, and our attendance was mandatory. I felt a little anxious, unsure of what the old man had planned. The meeting was held in the main hall of the Thorne family estate. The core family members were all present. The atmosphere was solemn. The patriarch sat in his commanding armchair, his gaze resting on me, Isabella, and Chloe, who stood between us for a long time. Finally, his eyes settled on me. The same eyes that once held such disdain now held a complex, almost gratified expression I had never seen before. "Ethan," he began slowly. "Grandfather," I replied respectfully, "these 5 years you have worked hard." His opening statement stunned the room into silence. He paused, then continued. "In the beginning, I did not approve of Isabella's decision. I felt that buying a husband with a contract was a disgrace to the Thorne family name. For 5 years, I have not looked upon you favorably." He was at least honest, but I was wrong. The patriarch's admission was a thunderclap. He looked at me with genuine approval. "When this family was in crisis, you did not abandon ship like some others. You stood firmly by Isabella's side and became her most reliable support. When my great-granddaughter was in danger, you risked your life to protect her, fulfilling the most important duty of a father. Your actions have proven that a man's worth lies not in his origins or his wealth, but in his character and his integrity. You are not only a worthy husband and father, but a true blessing to this family in its time of need." Arthur Thorne gestured to his butler, who handed him a file. I recognized it. It was the original 5-year marriage contract, now long since rendered meaningless. Before the shocked eyes of everyone present, the old man took the contract and, without a second glance, tore it to pieces. The confetti of paper fluttered down like a snowstorm 5 years late. From this day forward, the patriarch's voice boomed with authority. There is no contract husband in the Thorne family. Ethan Hayes is my grandson-in-law, my great-granddaughter Chloe's one and only father, and a true member of this family. He then produced another document and handed it to a lawyer present. I have decided to place 10% of my personal shares in Apex Holdings into a family trust. The beneficiary will be my great-granddaughter, Chloe Thorne. Until she comes of age, this trust will be managed exclusively by her father, Mr. Ethan Hayes. The hall erupted in gasps. This was more than emotional acceptance. It was the highest form of legal and financial validation. The patriarch was announcing my status to the entire Thorne clan and to all of New York City. I stood there, my mind blank. Beside me, Isabella's eyes were red with tears. She squeezed my hand, her own hand trembling with emotion. I looked at the formidable old man, at the undeniable affirmation in his eyes, and felt that all my sacrifices, all my endurance, all the quiet humiliations of the past 5 years had been redeemed in this single moment. I, Ethan Hayes, was no longer the $10 million husband hiding in the shadows. I had earned the respect of this family on my own terms. The chef's return, my official coronation, didn't change my daily life much. I still dropped Chloe off at school, experimented with new recipes, and kept the house running smoothly. The main difference was that Isabella started coming home earlier and earlier. She even started venturing into the kitchen, clumsily trying to help me cook, mostly by mixing of salt and sugar or getting eggshells in the batter. But watching her, so flustered yet so earnest, filled my heart with a quiet joy. The cold, sterile penthouse was finally filled with the warmth of a real home. One evening, after Chloe was asleep, Isabella pulled me into her study. "Ethan," she said seriously, "you can't just be a stay-at-home dad for the rest of your life." I was taken aback. Her eyes were shining. "You have your own talents. You should have your own career, not just be known as Mr. Thorne." I want to see you shine on your own stage." Her words struck a deep chord within me. Loving someone wasn't about possessing them, but about helping them become the best version of themselves. "I want to invest in you," Isabella said, a shrewd, confident smile spreading across her face. "Tell me, what do you want to do?" "What do I want to do?" I looked at the creative recipes I'd drawn for Chloe, at the shelves of books on nutrition and child psychology. An idea began to form. "I want to open a restaurant," I said. "A different kind of restaurant." With Isabella as my top-tier angel investor, my plan quickly became a reality. I chose a location in Brooklyn, in a vibrant old neighborhood I came from, with a beautiful view of the river. I named it Chloe's Kitchen. The restaurant was a labor of love. The ground floor was a high-end private dining experience, with a menu designed and cooked entirely by me. The second floor was a unique family space with a children's library and a play area. I also began hosting free workshops on parenting and child psychology, sharing what I had learned with other parents. On opening night, half of New York's high society showed up, not for Apex Holdings, but because they remembered the spectacular consommé and deconstructed candy Apple One had served at a long-ago corporate dinner. Chloe's Kitchen was an overnight sensation. My private dining room was booked solid for months, and my parenting workshops were packed. I was no longer just Mr. Thorne. I was Chef Ethan and Mr. Hayes. I had found my own value, and with it a profound sense of fulfillment. One day, a special guest arrived. He was an elderly man with silver hair, dressed in a traditional, elegant suit. My staff told me he was a world-renowned food critic, a master chef, Antoine Hayes, who had come specifically to try my food. He didn't order any of the elaborate signature dishes. He ordered a simple French omelet. I cooked it myself. When the waiter served it, I saw the old man's body jolt. He picked up his fork, took a single, thoughtful bite, and then 2 silent tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. He put down his fork, stood up, and walked slowly into my kitchen. He came right up to me and asked, his voice trembling, "Young man, who taught you to make an omelet like that?" I was stunned. "No one," I replied. I think I've just always known how. It's the only clear memory I have from my early childhood." He stared at me intently, his gaze shifting to a small, reddish birthmark behind my right ear. His whole body began to shake. It's identical," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "The golden purse fold, our family's secret. That birthmark, the same one your father had." He grabbed my arm, his voice raw. "Child, are you 29 years old? Did you grow up in the foster system?" I nodded, shocked. The next second, the legendary culinary giant collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "I found you. I finally found you. My grandson." My entire world tilted on its axis. I would later learn that my story was more remarkable than I could have imagined. I was the sole heir to the Hayes family, one of the world's most celebrated culinary dynasties. My grandfather was the man before me, the living legend known as Master Chef Antoine Hayes. 20-some years ago, my parents had died in an accident, and in the chaos, I had gotten lost and ended up in the foster system. All these years, my grandfather had never stopped looking for me. I looked at the old man weeping in my arms, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I wasn't adrift. I had roots. I had a family. That night, I told Isabella everything. She just smiled, hugged me, and kissed my cheek. "See? I told you. My husband was always destined for greatness." I smiled and hugged her back. Discovering my heritage was a wonderful gift, but it didn't change who I was. I'd already found where I belonged. My home was here, in the arms of this woman, with the little angel sleeping in the next room, murmuring daddy in her dreams. The Kiss of the Covenant, the first quarterly report for Chloe's Kitchen, came out, and the profits were beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Staring at the string of numbers in my bank account, money I had earned with my own 2 hands, I knew what I had to do. I took my first big payout and went to the most famous jewelry designer in New York. I didn't choose the biggest diamond. Instead, I had him create a custom ring based on my own design. On the inner band, he engraved the initials of our family, EIC, intertwined into a single, unbreakable symbol. With everything ready, on a bright, sunny afternoon, I told Isabella the first was taking her somewhere special. She asked where, but I just smiled mysteriously. The car finally stopped in front of a stately, imposing building downtown. Isabella stared at it, stunned. It was one of New York's most prestigious law firms. 5 years ago, this was where we had signed the cold, transactional contract that changed our lives. "What are we doing here?" she asked, confused. I didn't answer. I just took her hand and led her into the same conference room. Everything was exactly as it had been. I led her to the massive table, to the very spot where we had signed our names. Then, to her utter shock, I slowly dropped to one knee. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket, opened it, and held it up to her. "Isabella Thorne," I said, looking into her beautiful eyes, which were wide with surprise. "5 years ago, in this room, I signed a 5-year contract to become your husband. It was a business deal. Today, in this same room, I want to invite you to sign a new contract with me." I took a deep breath, pouring all my love and sincerity into my next words. "A lifelong partnership agreement, signed in the name of love. I, Ethan Hayes, want to spend the rest of my life as your partner, your personal chef, your daughter's forever father, and your most devoted guardian. This contract has no expiration date, no special clauses, and absolutely no option for termination. So, Isabella Thorne, will you sign this contract and marry me?" I finished. The conference room was so quiet I could hear our hearts beating. I watched as Isabella's eyes slowly filled with tears. They spilled over, tracing paths down her cheeks and landing on the cold marble floor, where they seemed to bloom like the warmest of flowers. She didn't speak. She just covered her mouth with her hand and nodded, again and again. I smiled. I took the ring and carefully slid it on her finger. A perfect fit. I stood up and pulled her into my arms. This room, once the symbol of our cold transaction, was now the witness to our eternal promise. A month later, we held a beautiful and heartfelt wedding on a stunning beach just outside the city. The sun was shining. The sea breeze was gentle. Chloe, in a little white dress, served as our flower girl, skipping down the aisle and scattering rose petals. I stood at the altar in a tailored suit, watching as Isabella, in a wedding gown I had designed for her, walked toward me on her grandfather's arm. She was mythically beautiful. When the old man placed her hand in mine, I saw that even he, a man of iron will, had tears in his eyes. I took Isabella's hand, and we stood before the officiant. In front of all our friends and family, I looked into her eyes and spoke my vows. From this day forward, I am no longer the contract husband who came for $10 million. I am Ethan Hayes, an independent, successful man who deeply loves his wife and daughter. Isabella, I love you until the end of my life. Through her own tears, Isabella spoke her vows, the first time she had ever let down her guard in front of the world to declare her love in such a soft, open voice. "Ethan, thank you. Thank you for spending 5 years teaching me how to love and how to trust. Thank you for giving me a family. I love you for the rest of my life." We exchanged rings and shared a deep, loving kiss. The crowd erupted in applause. I held her, looking out at our daughter chasing the waves on the beach, her laughter bright and free like the sun. "Son, Sam, my wife, my daughter." In this moment, my life was complete. A breakfast of happiness same morning, sometime after the wedding. We were back in the penthouse apartment on the east side. Golden sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, filling the living room with light. 6 a.m. I opened my eyes. But this time, the king-size bed beside me was not empty. Isabella was curled up in my arms like a cat, sleeping soundly. Her long hair was spread across the pillow, her beautiful face peaceful and serene, all its icy defenses melted away. I leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. She stirred, her long eyelashes fluttering, and snuggled deeper into my embrace, a contented smile on her lips. I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. I just tied my apron when I heard the soft patter of slippers behind me. "Morning, honey." Isabella, wearing one of my white dress shirts and nothing else, wrapped her arms around me from behind, sleepily resting her cheek on my back. "Why are you up so early?" I said, smiling as I turned to face her and tweak her nose. "I wanted to make breakfast with you," she said, standing on her toes to kiss me. "I don't know how to do anything, but I can be in charge of making a mess." I laughed. As we were joking around, nearly spilling a carton of milk, a bright, sweet voice called from the stairs. "Mommy, Daddy, you're playing the kissy game without me again." Chloe, in her pink bunny pajamas, came running down like a little cannonball and launched herself into our arms. "Come here, let Mommy and Daddy kiss you." I bent down and scooped her up, and Isabella leaned in. We both planted a big kiss on her chubby cheeks. She giggled, squirming from the tickles. At the breakfast table, it was the same 3 meals: Chloe's sunny-side-up egg, Isabella's American-style scramble, and my toast crusts. But this time, there was no silence. Chloe chattered excitedly about her dream of being a flying fairy. Isabella, sipping her coffee, discussed the new seasonal menu for Chloe's Kitchen with me, seriously suggesting we integrate Apex's AI nutritional analysis system into my restaurant. I listened with a smile as my 2 girls talked, occasionally reminding Chloe to eat slowly and wiping a milk mustache from Isabella's lips. The giant TV on the wall was still silently playing the morning business report. But now, no one paid any attention to the cold stock charts and market data. Sunlight streamed through the window, bathing our family of three in its warm, bright, hopeful glow. I looked at the two most important people in my life, one big and one small, their faces radiant with happiness. My heart felt full to bursting. 5 years, 1,825 days. I had come from a man who signed away his life to this. I may have lost a $10 million payout, but I had won the entire world. It was good.